Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
Jia Tolentino is a peerless voice of her generation, tackling the conflicts, contradictions, and sea of changes that define us in our time. Now in this dazzling collection of 9 entirely original essays, written with a rare combination of give and sharpness, wit and fearlessness, she delves into the forces that warp our vision, demonstrating an unparalleled stylistic potency and critical dexterity. Zadie Smith has described it as a whip-smart, challenging book that will prompt many of us to take a long, hard look in the mirror. And Rebecca Solnit has referred to Tolentino as the best young essayist at work in the United States. It's pretty cool. Emma Carmichael is a writer and editor. She is currently a staff writer on Wyatt Cenac's Problem Areas on HBO. She was editor-in-chief of Jezebel from 2014 to 2017. Prior to Jezebel, she served as editor of The Hairpin and managing editor of both Gawker and Deadspin. Her writing has been published in Deadspin, Gawker, Jezebel, Sports Illustrated, Spin, New York, and The Awl. Emma grew up in Brattleboro, Vermont, and graduated from Vassar College in 2010. She lives in Brooklyn, LA. All right, please put your hands together for Jia
Help! You guys, thank you for like standing and coming. This is crazy.
This is normal.
Yeah, this is a normal thing. This feels normal. Emma, it's great to meet you.
Yeah. I read some of your work this week, and it's true what they say. It's pretty good. It's decent, yeah. I'll never forget emailing you 6 years ago to work at the Hairpin and saying, I just have a feeling you're going to be the Joan Didion of our generation.
Fuck off.
Will you come work with me?
I owe my whole career to Emma, basically. She gave me my first job and then my second job. You can blame her, you know? You know what I mean?
Okay, let's do this. Let's start out. I have to pretend I don't know anything about you.
I know. So. I'm gonna, yeah.
Can you begin by telling us just how you started to approach this collection? You write about so many topics. You have such a, wealth of knowledge and topics that you can write about, except for sports, which is great. So how did you, when you were settling in to write this, how did you narrow down to 9 topics with this loose theme tying it all together?
I think, so, there are those things that in the back of your head, all these things were basically the things that I would get drunk and talk to you about, you know what I mean? We used to work above the Lululemon flagship store in Manhattan, the Jezebel office was right above it. So we'd pass it every day. And I just developed this, I would walk past it and reality would just fracture. And I was like, this is late capitalist fetish wear. Why? And then I would I was trying to figure it out. These were the things I started thinking about that essay. It's about optimization and the way that kind of athleisure treats the female body as a market asset that is divisible into further assets that have to improve their performance on the market over time. These things that I would just think about walking, going about my day. Another part of that was another workday thing where we would be I would take my lunch break. I'd be on Slack and be okay, I'm gonna get lunch, and then I'd go to Sweet Green and be on Slack the whole time I was getting lunch, and then get my salad, and then text the whole time I was eating it, and then my brain would just have an earthquake, and I was what's happening? I would get this deep existential dread from so many of the things that make up our everyday life, and it was basically there were 9 clipboards and then enough stuff, or there were 20 clipboards in my head and enough, and something would happen and I would just throw it on one of them, and then right around the time that I was maybe a good use of my next 2 years would be writing a book, 9 of them filled up. Mm-hmm. So I pitched it exactly as I wrote it, basically. It was these are these 9 questions that I have, why am I so freaked out by X, or why am I still thinking and talking about this thing?
So dread, you would say.
Yeah, dread's the driving. I actually think so that the Didion thing, which I know I heard that there's a like a Jezebel alumni Slack, and I'm not in it right now because I don't have to be on Slack for work. And I'm like, but I kind of miss it. But I heard that y'all were talking shit every time there was a you.
No.
But I actually think like that's the only like the Joan Didion thing is like an insult to her because she's a better writer, but it's also an insult to me because I'm a better hang. You know what I mean? And like. You know what I mean?
I think you should just lean into it and start recreating the iconic photos
Yeah.
completely.
Oh, I did want to do that. Like one of the I'm actually very glad I didn't do it now, but one of like remember my idea like the Corvette like cool. Like I was like me doing that but me like ripping a huge bong like instead of like smoking a cigarette.
In your like jean diaper.
Yeah, like what I'm wearing right now. I thought about doing like Rent the Runway for a book tour. Then I was like, you can't write a book about self-delusion and then like dress up nice for your book tour. Like it just wouldn't be correct. But anyway, I think that the Didion comparison is literally only because of the undercurrent of dread. Like I really don't think there's that much in common with our writing, but I think that she had this really palpable sense of dread at the end of the 60s and throughout the 70s about the changes that were on the horizon, and I think that I do too. Yeah.
Well, literally, like how I think reading this book, there's so many literary references. There's so much you obviously read and consumed and interviewed to write this. Like literally, I'm curious, how did you set out to write each essay, and how did you organize your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I got to write this book in like a year, and I was like, I wanted to do it kind of quickly, basically as quick as I could reasonably do it, and so I mean, in retrospect, it's too quick. Like in retrospect, I'm like, maybe I should have spent a little more time, but I think I mean, as you know, I like to, when I'm focused, I'm so focused, and when I'm thinking about something, I'm, so fixated on it, and then when I'm not thinking, I'm really not thinking, and I think that so basically there were like each essay was like a question, right? The first essay in the book is about the internet, and the question that I was trying to answer was, 10 years ago the internet felt generative and it felt fun and it felt like you could still go on it and be surprised, and now it's like suddenly, I mean really so quickly, it's a truism that it's destroying the civic fabric of the world, And I was just like, why was the internet good and why is it bad now? And actually, the part of writing each essay, I did each in basically 6 weeks, and I spent the first 3 weeks just reading everything I could, and then the second half writing it, which in like retrospect that seems crazy. Like I should have taken longer, but that was the reading thing was the best part. I feel like researching is the most fun thing about writing, and it's like the thing I like most about journalism is you have an excuse to call up somebody that's spent an entire lifetime studying something. You can be like, so can you explain like artificial intelligence to me, and they'll just do it, which feels crazy. Like sometimes I feel like this is the field I chose just because it gave me like an airtight excuse to do that. So basically I was just like, I would just make a reading list at the beginning, or I started making a reading list when I was writing the proposal. And part of the reason that I decided on these 9 ideas was I wanted to read all of these things on each. Like there's an essay about literary heroines and how they like start off really brave when they're kids and they get really depressed and desirable when they're teenagers, and then they, get to be bitter adult women and then they die, and like it's like I just wanted to read all of those books again from like, from Little House on the Prairie all the way to, Anna Karenina. Like I just wanted I wanted the excuse to, like that extracurricular feeling of having like a side reading list. It was, and also, so much of what I was trying to do with this book was kind of distract myself in maybe not distract myself in a productive way, but process in a productive way that sense of like dread and uselessness that I knew that I would feel from 2016 to 2020 at a bare minimum,
Yeah.
Like fully.
I want to talk about that as well, but first, I'm
talking about
curious,
dread.
Like when you went to the New Yorker, you had some reporting experience. Like I know you write about this in the book, but
yeah.
like that the Virginia trip was really your first time doing it. I had no doubts that you could do it because Gia's like, as you can probably tell, supernaturally comfortable in like most situations and can talk to a tree stump if she wants to. But when you set out. I've heard you say that you've turned down stories at the New Yorker because you didn't feel like kind of authoritative enough.
I was like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's true. It was true.
What makes you decide what you're capable of taking on and what you're not?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that, Emma.
Wow.
I think I don't know. So I've said this before, but I am not a personal believer in imposter syndrome as it relates to me specifically, because I tend to be overconfident and I tend to just blindly throw myself into situations and be like, I belong here, And I think that's another reason I like reporting, is because it gives you a structured excuse to do that. But so for me, like when I first got to the New Yorker, yeah, I had barely reported things. The first thing I ever reported was I went back to UVA, where I went to college, for Frat Rush after the Rolling Stone story. And I'm looking at Anna. I learned to report often by editing people I learned to report by editing our reporters. That was an education. It was sort of like I often think about editing as getting better at writing without having to write. And editing really great reporters was a way to learn. But when I came to the New Yorker, I was like, I definitely don't know how to report like a 7,000 word magazine feature. And I held off like a couple of things. I think when I just like know when I can't do something, like I think for me, I think this is not wise for everybody. But when I have the feeling that I can't do something, I think I'm right. And so I took like a year at the New Yorker to accept like a big reporting assignment, because I was like, I need to get my feet on the ground first. I think it's an underrated skill, like knowing when you are not ready for something. I think it's.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for like developing the skill of being comfortable in new environments? I think it's a unique one.
Do you?
Not caring.
Yeah. I think not caring is a huge one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, do you think it's part of, you write about this too, but part of your upbringing, which is unusual, and like you were constantly in environments that were extreme, right?
Yeah, so I grew up in a mega church in Texas. My parents are from the Philippines. I was born in Canada, but I grew up for 12 years going to a mega church attached to the second, or a school attached to the second biggest mega church in the country. And it was wild. Like, it was like everyone there was like, it was a very white, very rich school. And like my parents were neither. And, I didn't meet someone that was pro-choice or anti-war till I went to college, basically. Like I never heard the word feminist. And so, and the school, this like Bush era Texas Christianity is the most like hegemonic, like, I got my first promise ring, like true love waits ring, when I was in 4th grade. And I came home and I was like, Mom, like, guess what? I'm pure. And she was like, take that shit off you, She was like, you're 7, And I think that I learned really early on that you don't have to feel like you belong somewhere. I've never really you don't have to feel like you like that a situation is about you or addressed to you or made for you in any way to be able to enjoy it by just learning about it. And I think that that was the way I approached a lot of things. Like even in college, I did sorority rush like as a goof, and then just kept doing it. Like maybe my life has been a series of doing things like as a bit, and then they harden into lifetime reality, such as like monogamous heterosexuality. And, like wouldn't it be funny if I do this super predictable? But yeah, I think to me, I was thinking about this actually. One of the things that having to talk about myself so much recently, it's made me understand things about myself that I think one of the reasons I write so much is that I'm actually bad at understanding. I mean, I say this in the intro, like I'm bad at understanding things unless I write about them. And I think I realized that like the side of me that's always, like the half of my brain that's always worrying, like thinking about systems and, wanting to write things down and like a little bit uncomfortable, that is like a necessary, that's like the part, it's related to the part of me that's extremely present. Like in like, a bar class or whatever, I have been so much more alive to the strangeness of it because like I've been so much more present because I was always thinking about, So maybe it's like I'm comfortable because I'm always incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think I've been kind of surprised that some of the reaction of the book has been surprised that your essays don't have like neat, clean endings, kind of, and that I've always thought you're very comfortable in your writing in, a lack of neatness, basically, and like not being sure at the end, which I think, kind of relates to that.
Yeah.
Comfort, discomfort.
And I can't, I mean, that's one thing that was that could make this book an incredibly hard sell. Like when I was finishing it, people were like, "What's it about?" And I was like, dread, like, and it was, like I would go to meetings and, even at my publisher, they'd be like, "So what's the one takeaway that you want readers to come away with?" And I was just like, "Oh no," like I've made a huge mistake, but I think, there's this idea that people want that, but I don't actually think we do. Like, I haven't been able to trust a conclusive mood, basically. That was my biggest takeaway from, woke up the morning after the election. I was like, I will never be that certain again. And I should never be. Like, it is no longer appropriate to feel like your sense of morality applies to an understanding of what's going to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. Like, especially right now, I felt really strongly about that was like my main animating impulse, right? It's like, what kind of clarity can you achieve about the world without a resolution? Because that sort of feels like what's incumbent upon us to think about,
mm-hmm. Do you feel like you have more clarity having written this book?
I do. And I do in particular, like, I think one thing so in the book there are no, which I think has bothered some people, there are no like solutions, there's no like, here's then how we should live, and here's the things that will make it all okay. And I didn't do that not because there's a lack of like organizations and people working towards it, but more because I think like often when I write, like I was thinking, I wrote that like stupid large adult sons thing, and it's like I often will leave the most important point out of a piece because I think everyone is like, people are smart, like people can get it. And like the large adult sons piece was about race, but I didn't put it in there because it's so obvious, Mm-hmm. And I just like, I kind of think that's like a sign of respect. That might be me copping out of, being an unclear writer, but I think there are just some very obvious, and for me, like kind of talking about the book this way, the clarity that the book brought me to is that there are basically no individual solutions. Like there are things we can do that are coherent to our sense of morality and the way we want to live in this world, but there are no individual solutions. Like there are solutions to every single problem I talk about in this book, but they're all policy based. They're all about like economic redistribution, and and I think that that's maybe the clarity that I've gotten, that this confusion about the self in context of all these systems, it almost doesn't matter. Like the self doesn't matter at all. Like what matters is just the systems. And that's not in the book at all, but I think that it's the very obvious takeaway that anyone comes away with, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
You kind of touched on this, but a lot of the book, I'd say too, especially the reality TV episode, it's sort of about like the self that you project into the world and how you like consume that after the fact.
Yeah.
How have you found book promotion to be in relation to that?
Oh my God. Well, so it actually feels the exact same as watching the reality TV essay. So I was on this reality TV show and I was 16 and I never watched it, and I just kind of made myself forget about it. And then I was like writing a book about, like self-perception and the age of, self-surveillance. And I was like, oh God, I have to watch this show. And we were talking, Emma and I went on a trip before she tragically moved to LA, and we were talking about, I was like, I've never seen you uncomfortable. And Emma was like, yeah, I've never seen you uncomfortable either. And we were like, huh, what's wrong with us? And, but I was like, nothing makes me really, really uncomfortable anymore. I get uncomfortable like once a year. And watching that show, I like they would bring it, like my friends would bring it up and I would start screaming. Like I would put my hands over my ears and like start like rocking back and forth. Like I could not bring myself to watch the show because I think what I was dreading realizing about myself, or like seeing realized about myself, is that I've always taken very naturally to these mechanisms of self-broadcasting. I was on this reality TV show. I acted exactly the way that I do in real life now at 16. Like me in that reality show is identical to me earlier today. And that was both comforting and really scary, because it was like, this is why you don't mind being on Twitter, is because you voluntarily went on a reality show when you were 16. And I think that is, that bespeaks something wrong with me. But it also, anyway, to answer your question, I think what it's been like, it's weird to realize that you, like, it's always like realizing that you're suited to these mechanisms of self-promotion. I guess that's like what the whole book is about, right? Like, you're suited to, like, me realizing that I'm suited or drawn to systems that, are, that degrade our world, and I think realizing that, I can sit here and talk about myself, it feels like I'm both glad and I feel uncomfortable about it, yeah.
I saw a few tweets today from readers that basically were saying, like, I want to share passages from Jia's book, but basically, like, I fear that's too meta because you address virtue signaling so well in the book. Which strikes me as a great trap you said your readers.
Yeah. I felt like that reading. I've been, like, literally talking about this book every stop, but that Jenny Odell book, How to Do Nothing, like, that was the exact same thing. I read it and I wanted to tweet every page, and then I was like, Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that too. I know you've talked about this a lot, but you are also supernaturally good at turning off the internet occasionally.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you do that?
Yeah. So I think, I'm, for better or worse, I'm extremely all or nothing about everything, so my approach to the internet, and it changed since when I was an editor at Jezebel, I had to, you're just scrolling Twitter looking for things to assign, and so you're just strapped to this, you're strapped to a landmine all day long, just like being like, this is good, and then I stopped editing, and I felt so lonely in my brain because, like, when you're editing, I've talked about this recently, but one of the things that I loved about it was that your interest gets engaged with so many things. You are editing so many things that you inevitably bring your interest to bear. So I felt like I was interested in everything constantly all the time because the job kind of required it, right? And then I stopped being editor, started working just as a writer, and I was actually like, you know what? I'm not actually interested in everything. I don't actually care. Like, I was able to calibrate my relationship of, because I think the internet feeling is being able to know everything about everything, but being able to do less about anything. And I think not having to edit anymore allowed me to sort of be like, okay, I'll be online when I'm interested in it. But, I tried to lose the reflexive thing. So I tried to reorient my relationship with the internet. I'm still trying to reorient my relationship with the internet around pleasure. It's like, use it as long as you're having a good time, and once you stop having a good time, get off. Like, make yourself get off of it.
Right.
But it's hard because so many of our jobs require us to be constantly checking email, right? And so it's like, it is sort of systemically, if you're an Uber driver, you have to be on your phone all the time. Like, it's like, it is harder. Like, I am enjoying this position of extreme luxury where the only person I have to talk to all day is my editor and whoever I'm, interviewing for some piece I'm reporting. So I have, like, a built-in way to not be on the computer, which that's probably it.
Yeah, and you also enjoy the internet, right? I think that's fair to say. Like, you are an MFA graduate who thinks Dat Boy is the funniest thing. Dat
Boy is so funny. Oh my god. That was the last good meme, honestly. That was the last meme that, like, made me cry when I was just, like, sitting around, Like,
my wife, though.
Yeah, but that was my wife was pre-Dat Boy,
That's true.
Yeah.
I think some of the writing about the book has sort of suggested that it's a little bit, surprisingly, I think people are surprised that you are, I don't want to say cynical, but, like, a little bit more hopeless than they might expect.
Well, it's funny, the reaction to that, it's weird. I think it's kind of generational. Like, everyone that's people that are over 40 are like, wow, with a healthy dose of cynicism and, that verges on the fatalistic, and then some college students who are writing about it for their college papers, like, God bless them, are like, a book filled with hope, And I think that's kind of been the reaction. Like, it's like yeah. And so people that are older than me tend to react to this as, like, I'm super cynical. And then people younger than me tend to be like, wow, a path to the future. And
you can do both.
Yeah, no, but it's strange. And I told you, like, one of the things that threw me the most was I was doing some pre-interview for was talking to like a TV producer, and she was pre-interviewing me for something, and she was like, "So, I read the book, and my question for you is, do you believe in anything?" And I was like, "Oh no," like I was like, "Does this book make it seem like I don't believe in anything?" But I think that is a reaction, because I think that, we saw it all the time. Like there's just a natural inclination, probably in our human brains, and also when we render them onto the page in writing, like there's that movement, that sort of bullshitty movement at the end of each piece, I don't want to say bullshitty, like on some topics, like I was like Evicted, that Matthew Desmond book, right? Like I wanted that last 10 pages that's like, here are the policies we need, right? But a lot of things, there's this movement towards like, but in the end, like we'll all be okay, and like this book totally doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And I think it's jarring, because I think it's such a reflex in writing to tie it up. Mm-hmm. But that hasn't been how my brain has felt, even since long before the election. Like at Jezebel, I was trying to do that already, because I was so sick of just the cadence of that essay ending. That was like, but all isn't lost. And I was like, it could be,
Yeah. I also think that reaction kind of reflects, like, I don't know, a sort of lack of understanding of how aware millennials are of like the systems that shape us and our identities.
Right. And I think that like one of the only things that delineates the millennial generation is systemic, degradation and collapse. Like it's like it is defined like recession to the election. Like that's it. Like student loans, whatever, everything. And I think, I've been interviewing a lot of teens for this piece I'm reporting right now, and it's like it's like baked deep in their soul, like, and it's kind of great, but scary. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess to wrap it up, because I think we should do questions. What is your hope that readers, like you obviously wrote this book at a certain time for a certain reason. What's your hope readers will take away from engaging with it and thinking about what you're talking about?
I don't know, I don't know. I didn't think about that, because I truly didn't, because I almost feel like, and this is one of the reasons that I think I manage okay on things like Twitter. It's because it's like, it's not like, and this is one of the things that I found so interesting about Jezebel. It's like, it's not for me to say what anyone should do with their life, like even just the reflexive questions of like, is X good or bad? Like all of these, the what should we do? It's like, I haven't really tried to think about it, because it seems like audacious and wrong for me to be like, here's what you should take away. It's like whatever everyone takes away is whatever they take away. But I do think that it's that point that I was saying earlier that, and maybe it was like my takeaway, that all of this wheel spinning that I tend to do, possibly because of my evangelical upbringing, where I like evaluated my conduct at the end of every day, to be like, was I good or bad? Like that kind of doesn't matter anymore, right? Like we're dealing in extremities and stakes that are so far beyond the question of like, am I good or bad? Or like, is what I'm doing good or bad? Like the answer is always going to be both. Like, I think one of the things that this book made me think a lot about is that, and I've said this a lot, but that the conditions, like a lot of the systems that might benefit, all of the systems that benefit me are punishing other people. Like anything I benefit from is punishing someone else. And I think for a long time, I tried to think about that at the level of the individual. Like, what should I then do? And then I think I realized that that's the wrong question to ask, right? Like the answer is always going to be collective. It's always going to be systemic. It's always going to be policy. And that's like the closest thing to a takeaway that I have.
Yeah. I feel like you've been acknowledging in a few interviews lately, like the feeling of luck that you have, that like you're one of the lucky ones. Kind of.
Well, I've thought about that ever since, like, so at Jezebel we ran, I think the thing still that I'm proudest of ever doing, like maybe more than this book, was that abortion interview with Elizabeth or Erica. And she, she went through, like, this is a woman got an abortion at 32 weeks for, fetal abnormality, like a fatal fetal abnormality. And it was this horrible ordeal. And we were talking about it for 3 hours on the phone. And she was just like, I feel lucky. And I was like, do you really feel lucky? And she was like, yeah, I'm part of the global 1%, and we started talking about that. And I think, in terms of the biggest problems of our time, like climate change, like that's something that I think about all the time. And yeah.
I get to talk to Jia all the time, so you guys should ask her questions now. And best-selling book. Can we just...
You know the church name, the Pentagon. Oh yeah. You know, I think. Well, Lakewood wasn't around then. The bigger church with Joel Osteen, who is the better known Texas pastor, who's not. That's not the school I went to because they don't have a school. I think they had joined. They had been in a small church in Toronto, and they were. I think one of the reasons that anyone joins a megachurch in Texas or in Houston is that the city's too big to think of as a community. Like, there's not much of a sense of Houston as a community because it's so big and it's spread out over. It takes you 3.5 hours to drive across the city. There's just no way to think of the public. It has no public space. And so I think the church substitutes for it becomes a real community. And I think that's maybe, they just moved here from Canada. Maybe that's what they were looking for. But they were never, a lot of people have asked me, why, how did you not come out more fucked up? And I think the answer was that my parents were, they went to the church and we went on Sundays, but at home I was extremely free, they were just whatever you think is whatever you think. And I give them credit for that, even though I'm always sorry I wrote about drugs so much. Sorry, Mom.
Was there anything that surprised you or changed your take while you were doing the research for your book?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot surprised me. I mean, for me, feeling surprised is the number one and maybe the only thing that I look for when I'm writing. I think even if it's a little blog post, I feel that's when I'm I can't write something unless I've surprised myself a little bit. And so I think every essay did in some way, mostly because I had no idea. I mean, I had no idea. Actually, figuring out anything always surprises me. So everything surprises me constantly. But what really surprised me actually was personal. I was going back through. I fact-checked a lot of, whenever I write about myself, I went back and fact-checked it with my journals or talking to my parents or calling up old friends and be do you remember this? And the thing that surprised me the most, it's been so long since I was religious that I forgot what that felt like, I mean, I remembered what it felt like as a kid, but I forgot that I had felt it as, someone with pretty much the same brain that I have now, as a 14-year-old, as a 15-year-old. And that was a surprise for me, and thinking about why I had put that part of me away so firmly, that threw me for a loop.
What advice do you have for an aspiring author?
I have advice for this, but it's bad. It might be bad. It might be bad. I have to really, give you that disclaimer. So I feel I didn't call myself a writer until 4 or 5 years after, until a year after I was editing The Hairpin as my job. And I was in an MFA program because I graduated in 2009 and I was I'll never have a job. It will certainly never be the only thing that I'm good at. I was I don't know anyone in New York. I don't know anyone who's a writer. I was just I joined the Peace Corps. I was just this will never happen for me. And as a result, my relationship to writing for a really long time was just one of very private pleasure and challenge. And because I was I think it's still true. I thought then it's you can't count on anyone reading you. You can't count on being paid fairly or at all. You can't count on anything. You certainly can't count on how people are going to react, what they're going to think of you. All you can count on is the pleasure that you can generate for yourself. That's literally it. And I have followed that compass since 2009, basically. And I've gotten really, really, really lucky. But I think that was a pretty, even from a careerist standpoint, that's probably not a bad idea, right? Because I think that's the thing that'll make your work better. And that, the advice to an aspiring writer is just it's just your work. It's nothing, it's not about, I think it's not about reaching out to people at the right time or like playing your cards right. It's just about making your writing something that will continually generate like chemistry and friction and like, enjoyable problems and like the good kind of agony for yourself. And if you follow that, it's like you basically can't go wrong, because that's something that you can always figure out how to do for yourself and can continue to figure out how to do for yourself. But again, like, I don't know if that's good advice, but yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming to LA, Jia.
Oh, this is my aunt, my tita. You look great. Thank you.
Save me a trip to New York. This is the only time that I never had to force my kids to come to anything. So Tessa and Miguel. And yes, these are my sisters. I went to the same grade school with her mother. So yes, thank you so much. And you inspired me to write again, by the way. And
Oh.
my book, I already am telling you what to write on it.
Uh-huh.
So it says keep writing from Jia.
I will do it. I'll do it, Tita Thelma.
Just don't copy what I wrote.
Oh. Yeah.
So you mentioned in an interview that you had a novel that you shelved.
Yeah.
And would you ever revisit that? And if so, do you think you'll have kind of similar sense of like existential dread and resentment
About the novel?
in your fiction?
Oh, it was full of that for sure. I mean, what else is there to write about? And novels are like, novels are all about happiness and unhappiness and dread. But sorry, like, will I have that feeling again?
Revisit like the idea of writing a fiction novel.
I am dying to write fiction again, or work in narratives in some form. It's like what I'm going to try to do next, even though I don't know if it'll be a novel. Like probably like all journalists, I'm going to try to write a screenplay. But and it's partly because my sense of interiority, the texture of fiction, it's like the magic of fiction is about the texture of that interiority, and mine sounds exactly like myself, and that's a nightmare, And so, but I will never revisit it because I think, so I worked on that novel for 4 years. I shelved it. I didn't think it was that good. And I thought it was publishable, but I didn't think it was that good. And that's also something that I think I've never regretted that, because I think, we live in an era where we are encouraged to monetize every last bit of spare time, every moment, to render it monetizable and monetized for a social network or whatever, to make every bit of labor pay off, right? And it's really tempting, and I adhere to that incentive in so many ways. But with that novel, it was it's the big reminder in the back of my head that it's often better to leave things for yourself. It is sometimes really good to have things exist just to, to make things just so that they'll exist for you. And I think that's a hard lesson. That's a hard thing for me to even wrap my head around now. I think it's hard in our generation to do, because we're supposed to, be producing constantly. But part of the reason that I want to leave that put is because I want to remember that it's writing is worth it for its own sake. Devoting yourself to a project is worth it. The work itself is worth it. It's not what comes of it necessarily. And I actually still think that that's still how I think about all my writing. And it might just be protective. It might be me trying to protect myself against getting attached to results. But I also think that's not a bad thing either. And so it's that novel lives in the back of my head as a reminder that let's say, 2 months from now I start a new project and it sucks. I spend a year on it. Great. It's not time wasted. It's actually time incredibly well spent. And I think it's also just it's a reminder of just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And I think and that's I try to remember that, because I think we live in a time where it's also if you can do something, it's the world's ending, so, order a bathing suit on Postmates or whatever. And and I often am just because I could do that doesn't mean that I should, Oh.
You're talking about systems versus self and collective and policy. What do you think is a good way of talking about that and explaining that in a way that would be useful to them?
That's a really good question. So the question is like, how do we take the systems talk and apply it to, communist 14-year-olds or whatever, or make them into communist 14-year-olds? I don't know. I kind of think that they're closer to their, I mean, it might be I have been talking to a ton of teenagers recently, and they have the really tangible sense of systemic dread and futility, and that's kind of good because they want big solutions, I think, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm probably not a good person to, if I was like working with, if I was a community organizer that worked with voter registration, but these kids are already organizing, like the two biggest, grassroots, like campaigns of the last year. It's been the climate march and the Parkland kids, right? And they are too young to vote often. And I kind of think that maybe our role is just to support them and let them like, I guess what's incumbent upon us is to support the policies that they will benefit from and let them do the rest. There was another yeah.
Sorry, this question isn't like fully fleshed out, but like, in your essay, Pure Heroines, I was kind of wondering, I like totally like vibed with that whole essay, but like in the part where you talk about how young women are depicted, or like adult women are depicted, and how they like sometimes resort to like committing suicide, and like specifically thinking about like Madame Bovary and like or an adolescent's virgin suicide. I was kind of wondering like how you are thinking about like the writers of these novels, and how like those two novels like I just talked about, Virgin Suicides and Madame Bovary, are written by men, and how they're like depicting women in comparison to like all of the books about like happy young like child ladies are all written by women. So just kind of wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like Anna Karenina too, right? I mean, another suicide novel, but I actually like, I think that Madame Bovary and Anna Karenina are two of the best novels about women that exist, and I don't think that the fact that the authors were male, for me, that doesn't detract from it at all. Like I think what I do. I think that the movement from brave girl to bitter suicidal woman, they are exposing, no matter who the author is, that movement is exposing what there's not enough space for in real life. And there wasn't enough space for, marital unhappiness or divorce, or the possibility of a woman, living an independent life without the financial patronage of a man. There'd be no, those novels are exposing a problem that I want exposed. And I think what I do think of as, if there is sort of an essentialist difference in, great novels written by men about women canonically, to me, where I really feel a textural difference is how rape is used in them. Like for like Tess of the D'Urbervilles or whatever, rape is, for me, used much more mechanically and conveniently in even great novels written about women by men. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily the depression part that I find like different gender-wise. Yeah. Someone had, yeah.
You talked earlier about not wanting to provide answers for people or tell people how to live on like an individual level, which feels like a pretty strong contrast coming from a very evangelical background where
Maybe that's why I have it.
morality
I
is
just figured that out. Thank you. Like literally, never had that thought before. Cool.
so can you talk about sort of the journey coming from a very like this is how you're supposed to live world to where you are now,
Yeah.
and how this goes away with your own personal morals?
Yeah, so I have so many holdovers from that part of growing up, and some of them I think are really wonderful, right? Like some of them, like the understanding of, being 7 years old and feeling like I was walking around in this halo of golden light from God, this ecstatic feeling that I had as a kid, like wanting to be in huge crowds with like stained glass everywhere and like music really loud, and just feeling sanctified in some way. I love that I still want that feeling, and it's led me to a lot of good things, I think, though others might disagree. And I think, like, plenty of me has not changed at all. Like that sort of continual auditing, the moral auditing, and thinking of life as a moral act, and there being sort of a built-in moral imperative to, do something. And also, like a sense of mystery. I think I still have that from growing up religious. The thing about, but me leaving, my main path away from the church was me hating the prosperity gospel and me hating economic conservatism and me, hating this, like the reflexive pro-war, like all of that stuff. But what I also, it just became so clear to me that, we all have to figure these things out for ourselves, it's so important to have a sense of morality that we think about with that much importance, but it seems impossible to me that it could ever come anywhere but from inside, or even though there are so many factors that shape that. And I think it's like, in that way, the church flipped me 180. Like, it kept one part exactly the same, but the idea became that this sense of morality just, it wouldn't stick unless it came from deep, deep, deep down inside you, and only you can figure that out, which is probably part of the reason that, it's no good telling anyone what to do. All you can do is kind of hope that maybe something will, the most I've ever hoped for of anything I've written about is that maybe something will shift a little bit in someone else that'll be good for them, maybe, That seems like the most you could ever hope for. I like your shirt. It says, "It's an honor just to be Asian."
Was there an idea that you ended up not including in the book, that you wanted to, too much or too late?
I pitched the book exactly as I wrote it, so at that point, no. But there were things I did think, there probably should be a Peace Corps essay in the book, but I'm not clear enough about that time of my life to write about it. I still don't understand it enough to write about it. And I also didn't keep any notes, because one of the things I was trying to do, and I write constantly, compulsively all the time, but when I was in the Peace Corps, I was this is, in order to decenter myself, one way to do that is to not constantly write down what I'm thinking all the time. And I did that, and it maybe drove me crazy. I maybe need to be writing all the time. And as a result, maybe I'll never be able to figure it out, because I don't have the recording of it, and all I have is whatever narrative I've made out of it in the meantime, which I don't feel like I can trust it. So I did think about that, but I didn't ever start writing about it, because I think it was so clear to me that I don't know enough. Yeah.
Cool. I think Gia's going to sign some books.
Thank you guys for coming and for standing. Thanks, Emma.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.